Welcome to Total War News. My name is Cody Bonds. Today's news is the patch notes for Total War Warhammer 3's Update 2.3 have been released. This news comes to us via the official Total War blog post, which I will link to in the description below. It begins with the rather unfortunate reminder that this will be the last update for 2022 and that you should not expect any new DLC or content for Warhammer 3 until early Q2 2023. And that's April, folks. In case some of you missed that rather disappointing update in their last blog post. On to what has changed in the game that's already in our hands. The in-game scenario customization is now available for multiplayer campaigns. Previously, this was limited obviously to single player, and this does include the Ultimate Crisis mode. So if it's something you enjoyed in single player but couldn't wait to share it with your friends, well, now it is definitely something you can do. The starting lords from Warhammer 1 have been using their original starting videos ever since the first game over 5 years ago now, and to help bring them up to a modern standard and frankly spruce them up a little bit, the original 8 lords have had their video introductions replaced. If nothing else, it might encourage you to go back and try someone you might have missed from game 1. The vast majority of the patch notes, though, cover stability and performance and gameplay and what could all frankly just be phrased as bug fixes, because there is a laundry list of them, and if you found yourself running into a bug in the previous game that was game-breaking or stopped you dead in your tracks, I encourage you to look at this rather lengthy list, as perhaps your bug has been squashed in the meantime. But a few legitimate additions have appeared with patch 2.3. Landmarks present in the original Mortal Empires map and the Realm of Chaos map have finally been ported over to Warhammer 3 for factions when appropriate. They've also added several new landmark variants for the Monogod factions near their Immortal Empire's starting locations. These landmarks will appear for Nurgle in Pigbarter, for Tzeentch at the Golden Tower, for Khorne in Galbaraz, and for Slaanesh in Tor Elir. A number of new 10-slot settlements have been added to the map to help players out, and that's really all that's new. Patch 2.3 does not include a major race overhaul or even any regiments of renown, and instead continues to focus on dealing with existing issues. But there are the usual balances and tweaks to specific factions, which we'll hit the highlights of here. The most important of which is that crumbling damage for the Undead factions was increased in Update 2.2, but the developers still feel this change was not sufficient enough to counterbalance the high morale that these factions normally have. As such, in 2.3, they have toned down these factions' leadership even further. The general idea being that the Undead are meant to spend a longer amount of time in the crumbling state, compared to something like demonic instability, which is why the damage is low and it's a slow, lingering death. When it comes to individual changes, the Tomb Kings have had their healing capacity provided by the Realm of Souls mechanic greatly reduced, while the Vampire Coast has seen an increase to the size of their raised dead pools to help them scale better with corruption and make them more comparable to something like the Vampire Counts. The Vampire Counts themselves obviously have the aforementioned crumbling changes, but have also had the power of their Forbidden Rod toned down. Isabella von Karstein is obviously disappointed, but I've been assured that Vlad von Karstein still has plenty of rod left to give. The underwhelming state of Bretonnia, my personal favorite faction, has finally been noted by the developers, and player feedback and their own data indicate that Bretonnia may not be living up to the ladies' expectations, particularly in multiplayer. Their infantry is a bit too costly and their cavalry is a bit too weak. As such, the Creative Assembly has decided to lower the cost of most of the faction's defensive infantry and added a considerable mass multiplier to the Lance formation stance, which is present on most of the Bretonnian cavalry and was their unique ability on tabletop. This should allow them to break through enemy units and formations more effectively and punch a hole for further cavalry charges. Developers admit that perhaps their recent Dark Elf Slave update didn't quite work out balance-wise, and they do admit that on certain buildings there is a much too aggressive slave decline rate, the slave cap itself may be too restrictive, and that dictates lose their luster much too quickly, among many other minor issues. And they have added tweaks to these in this patch to try and make it a little more fun to deal with. For Grand Cathay and Update 2.2, they pushed a fix, quote-unquote, to stop yin and yang buildings from being converted back and forth to each other, which many of us were a bit confused by, as it was a basic thing you needed to do to balance out their economy. In retrospect, Creative Assembly feels that the change actually worsened the player experience and made for a more cumbersome and rigid playstyle. They have therefore decided to revert the change and allow you to swap back and forth between them again. When it comes to Nurgle, they're focusing on multiplayer yet again and are trying to make their Chaos Shrines more expensive on their characters while also encouraging the inclusion of elite monsters and Chaos Knights in their meta. They don't just want you bringing fat, tanky guys that run around all the time. When it comes to battle balances, there is a bit of tweaking that now happens with AI behaviors. In patch 2.3, they're giving you more specific control over one area in particular, what they refer to as proactive evasion, the AI's willingness to see into the future and evade incoming damage from spells, artillery projectiles, and light projectiles while fighting in settlements and frankly all other battles. This behavior will now scale based on your difficulty setting. On easy, they won't evade at all. On normal, they'll try and evade spells. On hard, they'll evade spells and light projectiles. And on very hard, they'll dodge everything, because if you're playing very hard or legendary, you're already a glutton for punishment anyway. Because it's an unbalanced wasteland where archers rule and no one has ever been satisfied with its balance. On that note, ranged units have also had their behavior changed slightly, and it will scale based on difficulty of the level you choose. For the easy difficulty, AI ranged units will shoot at the first enemy unit they encounter, and this is also true for normal as well. On hard difficulty, the AI will prioritize shooting soft targets first, and on very hard, they will focus fire you to death and make the lives of your heroes a living hell. The developers do want to stress that none of these changes are final, and they are continuing to look at ways to balance it better in the future. So, as always, make sure to leave your comments on the official Total War forums or their Discord channel. At the end of the blog, they want to reiterate that this is the final update for 2022, so don't bother asking. But they will try and release another State of the Game blog sometime in December, undoubtedly telling us the DLC has been delayed to Q3. And to put a cherry on an already lackluster blog post and update, they end by warning you that if you are playing the Immortal Empires multiplayer campaign and you double-click to initiate diplomacy while any other player is in the Call to Arms resolution screen, it will crash your game and it will be your fault because they warned you. So make sure to screen watch your opponents at all times, because if you fail, it will be your fault. But they do apologize that you didn't read the blog post. Thank you for watching. This has been Total War News, and I'm Cody Bonds. Make sure to stay tuned for this channel for any Total War news as it develops, though I wouldn't expect much until we see the spring. I want to especially thank the Patreons for this channel, as they help keep us on the air for both the good news and the bad, but always sarcastic and delivered to you with beautiful dulcet tones. Thanks for watching.